Call this meeting to order and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence for Melissa Horton and her husband Mark. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And that being said, we have another special guest here. We have to have our picture retaken with Peach, the therapy dog, because the last one was just bad. Flat out bad.
Peach was good.
Peach was good, but the rest of us commissioners was not good. So, Dave, where would you like to do that?
Up front.
I think Gary just wanted to hold them.
No.
Yeah.
No, Greg did. You was there, that's why you messed it all up.
Where?
Sure, yeah, that was me. I managed to manipulate technology.
You caused that picture to be that bad?
Yep, that's
Oh,
right.
that was terrible. We all look like we had.
Better you. Faces look much better. Is it tough? Is it tough to be you?
It's tough, yeah.
Peach gets center.
You have to be
center
good.
stage. See, Peach is getting bigger. She's getting harder for her to hold on to him like that.
This is way better.
Dave just zoomed in on the dog, not us.
Honestly, it's probably
That's
better.
a better shot.
Oh, what's this? What's this?
Any of those?
You got a good one in there?
Good job.
It's hard to get good pictures of puppies.
You can come every meeting. You make the day.
We need therapy.
What?
Yeah, every board meeting.
Every board meeting we'll do a dog.
Bring a puppy in, we'll be good.
Okay, I know. She's like, let me down. You got a good one? Thank you. Okay. Somebody else want to say hi?
Well, now that the puppy's gone, we need a motion to adjourn, right? But we can't, so.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Emily. Bye, Peach.
Hi, Peach.
And we'll move on to open forum.
Motion to approve.
Motion, oh, the agenda.
Yes. Where is it?
Approve the regular meeting agenda.
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Holtz, second by Commissioner Felber. All those in favor?
Aye.
Now we can move on to open forum. Is there anyone there set to speak, Brian?
Got over to the mic here.
Cute puppies show everything.
We have 5 speakers signed up to speak today.
Okay.
And that starts with Tim Sakai.
Sakri, close enough. Good morning.
Morning, Tim.
My name is Tim Sakri. I reside at 15940 41st Street. I would like it noted for the record that many concerned neighbors, including myself, were present at the recent San Diego Town Board meeting to voice our opposition to the renewal of the Boulder Creek liquor license. I am reiterating that opposition here. The majority of the neighbors do not support having a bar in our residential area. Since operating, the establishment has knowingly violated numerous conditions of its conditional use permit, which has all been documented. It also operated without a proper license for 2 years. I am still awaiting an update regarding a second letter of violation or civil action relating to the bar's continued disregard for the approved hours of operation. There was a misstatement at a recent commissioners meeting, correctly stated, according to the CUP, the bar is not permitted to operate without both required licenses in place, a farm winery license and a county liquor license. Without both, it cannot legally function. According to the state statute, the county board shall consider testimony and exhibits presented in interested parties and may base its decision to issue or deny a license upon the nature of the business to be conducted and its impact upon the municipality, the character of the reputation of the applicant, and the proprietary of the location. So why would you approve an application that allows patrons to drink alcohol in a residential neighborhood? Bars aren't allowed next to schools or churches. As you consider whether to renew this license, we respectfully ask that all of these violations and concerns be taken into serious consideration. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
The next speaker is Shailene Sacre.
My name is Shalene Sacre, and I live at 15940 41st Street in Becker. I strongly oppose the renewal of the liquor license for Boulder Creek Wine Bar. I also oppose the presence of any establishment that manufactures, sells, or serves alcohol within a family residential neighborhood. Our neighborhood was established 30 years ago, and I remember it well because I was a substitute mail carrier at the time where the road was still sandy. Boulder Creek has been in operation for 2 years and is now entering its 3rd season. From the beginning, residents have expressed concern about the presence of a bar operating in a neighborhood where families live and raise children. These concerns have only deepened as more neighbors have become aware of the bar's documented noncompliance with its conditional use permit as found in public records. Does this continued noncompliance justify a renewal of their liquor license? The priority of our neighborhood is, and always has been, the safety and well-being of our families. We look out for each other, and we work together to keep our community safe. It is not the neighborhood's responsibility to support or sustain a business that manufactures and sells alcohol. While renewing this liquor license might benefit the township or county financially, it is not in the best interest of the people who live there. I would hope Sherburne County Board would prioritize safety over revenue. I respectfully ask that you deny the renewal of this liquor license now and in the future when it comes before the county board. Thank you.
Thank you, Shailene.
Next speaker is Peter Koop.
Good morning. My name is Peter Koop, and we live in that area on the 41st Street. It's 15850 41st Street. It's we're neighbors to that bar, and we already lived there 26 years, and it was so nice. I mean, we have 26 grandkids grew up on the street. And they were nice. They would, it was nice for them because the cul-de-sac. Nobody was there, but only the people that live there. And the kids, the grandkids, they could come over to our houses, be happy, playing in the backyard. They come together, and it was fine. But now you can't do that because when the wine flag is there outside, and we cannot let the kids go there because who knows what kind of drivers are there, that coming on the street. We see the cars driving there. We know, oh, these are Socrates' car or his wife or some other Tim in the back at the dead end there, and we know those cars. And then some of them, they go, oh, very good speeding there and stuff. And we cannot keep our grandkids, let them go out, on the street. Somebody has, with adults, go there. And it's even dangerous with adults. Because usually we would ride a bike there on the streets because no cars, only our neighborhood there is driving there. So, and we really, really don't like the bar there in our neighborhood, across the street from our house there. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter.
The next speaker we have is Yelena Roscoe.
My name is Elena Rosco. I live at 16345 41st Street, and I'm here in opposition to the wine bar in our neighborhood because it is a residential neighborhood. We do have kids and adults taking walks with strollers, bikes, scooters, and I don't feel that it's safe to have such a business in the residential neighborhood. There are other businesses, and that's fine, but if it's a business that's gonna have impaired drivers and too many drivers on a dead-end street, I feel that it puts our safety in danger. And I would highly recommend not to approve this license or renew it. Thank you.
Thank you, Lena.
And the last speaker we have is Adina Koop.
Good morning.
Good morning. Hello, my name is Adina, and I live at 16095 41st Street. We've lived here. I wasn't born here, but every single memory that I have is in this house, in this neighborhood growing up. And so I am in opposition to the Boulder Creek liquor license. This neighborhood is special, and it's special because when you're on vacation, and vacation is your time to get away, when I'm on vacation, I can't wait to get back home, to get back to the peace and quiet of the neighborhood that I feel here in this neighborhood, back to walking in the neighborhood where it's peaceful and quiet, listening to the birds chirp and people's chickens roaming around. So we have had several sheriffs that have lived and resided in the neighborhood in the past, and we've never had an issue with any of the sheriffs living right in our neighborhood. And up until this Boulder Creek bar came up a couple years ago, we've never had issues, and we were all able to live at peace with one another, taking care of our neighbors and really helping to care for our community. And now, since this bar has become a business in the neighborhood, now there's division and tension in the neighborhood, and there's no more peace. And it's a very strange feeling that we've had the last couple of years with some of our neighbors. So as you heard the previous testimonies, there's many of us that have resided here in this neighborhood since the very formation of the neighborhood when the first properties went up for sale. And so we're law-abiding, tax-paying neighbors who've cared for the neighborhood, for the community, who have kept the neighborhood clean and made sure that everybody was able to be treated well in the neighborhood. Everyone, all the guests who came in, were all treated well. Is it really fair to continue this bar experiment in a peaceful residential area where we've built our lives? Our quiet residential street shouldn't be a testing ground for a bar like this. And this has been a nuisance to the neighbors that are currently living there, such as us. What exactly has to happen for this liquor license to be denied for our residential street? Are you just waiting for someone to get hurt before admitting that this is not the right place for a bar? The neighborhood represents the American dream. Please don't take that away from the neighbors. This bar is not essential to our residential neighborhood. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And there are no further speakers, Chair.
Thank you, Brian. Moving on to the consent agenda. Any questions or thoughts, Bruce?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. No, we did not field any requests to remove anything from the consent agenda.
Okay.
The consent agenda is presented.
We have a motion by Commissioner Danielowski. Second by Commissioner Felber. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you. We'll go on to announcements. Bruce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. I'll keep my announcements brief since we'll have more time to discuss and workshop the legislative outcome and the budget information. Just a couple of calendar call notes. Reminder, you do have a notice. There is a public hearing tonight in Elk River if you're interested on the county's project with County Road 33. So that's at City Hall if you're interested in attending that. Second of all, just wanted to note for upcoming meetings, not listed here, but of interest to the board, the Planning Commission in well, Lynn just left, I believe it's going to be July, we'll be holding a public hearing on some of the comprehensive plan amendment changes that you talked about in workshop, and then they would come back to you in August. So we're bifurcating those, the ones that were clear and easy, we're going to go ahead and process, and then they'll come back to you for following the Planning Commission public hearing. And then the more challenging ones will come back with some options for you, and then you can discuss that in a future workshop. And again, the reason for that is the comprehensive plan, we don't have the public hearings in front of you like we do for ordinances, but the plan itself goes back to the Planning Commission. So we'll be working on those and getting that, but if you're interested in attending that, we'll make sure that you're aware when that Planning Commission is. And then second of all, we are having the workshop today, a couple of them for just the topics of importance to you. But if you see anything on future workshops, let me know. Obviously, your staff is shifting right now to a lot of the budget discussions, but we don't want to miss what's important to the board on policy or other activities or programs. With that, I can stand for any questions you have. Otherwise, just a reminder, we'll take a break here right at 9:30 to recognize our employees.
Questions, thoughts? None? We'll move on to the regular agenda number 1. Corey, consider approval of the advertisement for a public hearing for 2025 fee schedules, community corrections. Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. The reason for my request for a public hearing on July 22nd is my management team and I have looked at our current 2025 fee schedule, and as the Commissioners know, community corrections will not be receiving the same amount of subsidy starting July 1st from the Department of Corrections. So we would like to be proactive with addressing certain fees that we can adjust. Current fees that we cannot touch based on legislation is the supervision fees. So although those might be sunsetting in 2029, we cannot increase those. We can increase other fees in regards to correctional services. So right now, those fees are around drug testing and programs that we offer. So I'd like to hold that public hearing to make a request to change some of those fees.
Wishes of the board?
I'll make a motion to approve the advertising of a public hearing for July 22nd, 2025, to consider possible changes to the Sherburne County All Services and Fee Schedule, which would be made effective August 1st, 2025.
We have a motion by Commissioner Danielowski.
Second it.
Second by Commissioner Felber. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Looking at the clock, it's 9:20.
Thank you.
And Lorraine's here. Do we want to move on?
Yeah, I think you're okay to go on.
Okay. We'll move on to review and accept the Auditor Treasurer's monthly report for June 2025. Lorraine.
Good morning, Commissioners. Enclosed in your packet was the May trial balance prepared by Accounting Manager Sherlyn Kapsner. It includes ARPA funds of $1,808,514.51 and the Recorder's Compliance Fund of $259,573. Also included was the 3-page investment report prepared by the Finance Officer Brenda Davis. Our investment earnings are above budget by over $550,000 at month end. Interest earnings year to date are $1,550,625.37 compared to $1,334,754.16 last year, ahead by over $215,000 from the previous year. There is also page 6 has your budget to actual prepared by function, and that is a modified accrual report. So Brent, if you want to move up a couple more. That's our accrual report. Okay. And then property tax collections. On June 4th, my office sent out late notices, courtesy notices we call them, to 1,543 parcels. That is 3.8% of the total that we mailed out. These were that first half real estate taxes had remained unpaid at that time. This was up from 2024 by 212 parcels. Our taxpayers generally do appreciate receiving those notices, but they are frustrated that the post office has had some timeliness issues on their payments received by the counties. We do still look at every payment that comes in and match postmark. So if we do end up receiving a payment, even today, that was postmarked before the 15th, we do not charge penalty. So that's statutory. We do call them courtesy notices. They are not required by law, but we have found in the past that it has found errors that may not be our errors. In this particular case, we had a taxpayer contact us and say, hey, my bank paid this with their escrow. So in looking at what we got from the bank and contacting the bank, the file they sent us was incorrect. There were a few parcels in their listing that had been moved one line different. So this is how we find different things like that. We were able to correct it, make sure the taxpayer got the proper credit, made sure that the bank had their file corrected moving forward. So that's part of why we send them out. And it, does help our collections. We are working on the property tax settlement. That journal entry will be in your July packet. Portions have already gone out to the school districts and to the towns and cities. They get a 70%, and we'll be doing the final that first week in July, paying out the final for settlement. Our 2024 annual comprehensive financial report is in its final stages of review with the auditors. We are on track to meet our June 30th deadline to send it to the GFOA for that certificate of award. Thank you again for allowing us to do that. This will be our 32nd year applying for that award. So, I also received the 2024 population estimates. This is preliminary information. The townships and cities do have the opportunity to request a change with the Census Bureau. But for the estimated total for 2024 for Sherburne County is 103,059. It's an increase of 0.83% from 2023. So that is all I have for you today. Any questions for me?
Questions for Lorraine? Comments? Looking for a motion to approve.
The only question I have is unrelated to the budget proposal.
You hit your mic.
Yep.
We do have enough.
Oh, you know what, we're not.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, they aren't working. This.
Mine is.
All right, I'll check with Adam.
Well, Mr. Chairman, we have discussion. I'll make a motion on, I make a motion on the, accept the
Go ahead, spit it out.
I got it.
I'll second that.
Yes.
Greg seconds that. Any further discussion on that? All those in favor?
Waiting for.
The mic, yeah.
Yeah.
Just talk loud, Andrew.
We'll just do it. I was just wondering the date. I know you're working on a report with Ken on some of the election stuff. I just wanted to know what date we were looking at.
We're looking at the July meeting to do that.
Okay, perfect. That's all.
Yep.
Outstanding. Thank you.
Any other further discussion?
No.
Motion to accept the been made. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Same sign.
Just to note, the mics will be fixed during break here, but we can pick up with the ceiling mics, so just speak louder if they don't happen to come back on.
Okay. And with that, we'll recess the meeting for the employee recognition in the staff lounge.
In the cafe, yep.
In this meeting of the Sherburne County Board of Commissioners, and we'll, agenda item number 272, update on the through Highway 169 County Road 4 interchange project. Andrew Witter.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, County Commissioners. Just wanted to provide an update on the Zimmerman interchange project and where that stands as far as scheduling, funding, kind of all of the above. I honestly wish I had a much better message to deliver, but unfortunately, we are still in the waiting game for FHWA to continue to process the $25 million infra grant that we received. I'll go back a little bit and say that as of the end of April, we were ready to advertise the project. Unfortunately, with the new administration, we had a grant agreement from the old administration that was not agreeable to the new administration, and it wasn't until March of this year that we were made aware that that grant agreement would not be executed by FHWA. So we quickly kind of repositioned where we're at, tried to figure out the best course of action to get something moving in regards to that project, and at that time, the best thing option that we had was to become a direct recipient with the federal government, the US DOT. I can tell you in my 25 plus years of being an engineer in the state of Minnesota, I've never done this before. And I don't know of any of my colleagues in the 87 counties that have ever done this before. Followed up by MnDOT State Aid, who are our partners in delivering all of our federal and state projects, have never done this before. So when I say we're kind of going through an unprecedented process with this project, it's not an understatement. So as I mentioned, we were ready to advertise the project after receiving the categorical exclusion approval, which is this form of environmental documentation, which in short is essentially an update to the environmental assessment that was completed in 2013. And we're continuing to work through that direct recipient grant agreement process with FHWA. That being said, we had a conversation with our representatives at FHWA, and they have softly, verbally committed to doing everything they can to have the grant agreement in place and authorized by July 15th. That being said, we can't do anything before July 15th. That kind of turns the construction schedule and process and staging upside down. So we're in the process of figuring out what that wants to look like, if we even have opportunities to really start any construction work this year. I'll stand here and say that it will change the staging and the schedule, and it's very, very likely that it will push into 2027 at this point. So very unfortunate. It is costly too, as you think about construction cost inflations just year to year. We're going to recognize some of those. I guess the little bit of bright news in the conversation here is that, you know, we do have the funds available within the project to help cover those, but unfortunately, from my perspective, there really shouldn't be a need to do that, but it is going to end up spending more money to get this constructed and completed. So that being said, like I said, we're working on trying to figure out what the construction staging and construction schedule wants to look like for the remainder of 2025. It might just be utility work. It might be some prep work, some crossovers on 169 being built. It might be some of the smaller local road systems that we need to get completed. The larger issue, these contractors are very good at what they do. If we tell them we need something done within a certain amount of time, they'll figure out a way to get it done. The issue is that the materials that we need to get it done, the manholes, the special builds on some of these structures that are required, have a lead time. There's not really much we can do with that because we end up being in a queue with all of the other construction projects in the region and the state. But that being said, if we can get the materials, I know our contractors are very good at what they do. We're going to see one of the larger contractors in the state. They call us weekly. What's the update? What's going on? Where are we at with the schedule? Maybe lastly, on a legislative level, we have been working with our congressmen and senators on this, trying to get some support, trying to get them to urge FHWA and USDOT to move more expeditiously on this to help us get to a point where we can get it advertised and can start working on the project. It's helped to some extent in the fact that we are number one in line on this. I can tell you we're in front of a couple of the metro counties even through this process, so they understand the urgency and the need for us to get this grant agreement completed as quickly as possible. With that, maybe I'll turn it over to Administrator Messelt if he has anything else to add before we open it up for questions.
Yeah, just for those of you who are real savvy on the staffing involved, so we're working directly with Luke and also with Stacy, and then Sally's been made aware of it as well. So, you know, Congressman Emmer's staff is doing, I think, everything they can do, but if you do have interactions with them, just maybe thank them for their efforts, but encourage them. This is gonna cost millions, and it's taxpayer dollars that could have gone to other projects. And at this point, I don't see a reason for the delay. I mean, the level of questioning we're getting on the application is borderline asinine. So that's my professional opinion. Sorry there, Brad. I know you're proud of me now. So.
Mr. Chairman, can I go?
Commissioner Schumacher.
I will say, I believe in our staff, and I believe out of the 87 counties, that the man for the job to lead the way is you and your staff and the team that we have in the Public Works. I believe if we're gonna have a challenge in this state, and you have the ability to lead the way and pave the exact process that the other Twin Cities counties are doing, there's only one engineer I'd want, and it's you, Andrew, and your team and your staff in Public Works to deliver that for us.
Thank you.
And so you will, I'm saying as an encouraging thing, I will talk to Stacy. I just talked to her yesterday, and I'll follow back up with Stacy, who's in Tom Emmer's office. But again, I am 100% confident in the Sherburne County Public Works Department and you as their leader to pave the way and lead the 87 counties in this state to deliver that process for us. And I've said wholeheartedly, I mean, not because I voted for you to renew your contract for 5 years last month, but I'm saying in general, the process that I have, because I had worked, you know, in other places where we saddled another county, and you are, you know, a person that people look up to in your industry, and they're, you know, answer questions and problem solve. And so I say that wholeheartedly, and thank you, and Dave Rodell to the same thing to Dave, you and Dave, and the entire staff in the Public Works Department.
Thanks.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Danielowski.
Thank you. I just wanted to say too, I know it's frustrating to see that amount of dollars that could have went to other road projects that are in desperate need of being done. But it also is hard to know that it also affects business owners and people. We were trying so hard to make this as streamlined of a project as possible and with as little impact as possible to the business community and the residents. And it looks like it, hopefully we can meet a timeline and still be there. But if it has to drag out, that's the business owners and the residents that pay that price too. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I may
Andrew.
real quickly, just to respond, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Danielowski and the entire board, we do still have plans to have a public information meeting once we get closer to that point of construction, actually when we have the contractor on board. We know we're gonna have to get out there and aggressively communicate these changes to the public based on what we're dealing with now. We've got Orange Ball, which will be, continue to be a partner. We've got a communication team with Bolton and Mink, who is our consultant helping us out not only with design, but also with the construction administration. So we know that we're going to need to aggressively communicate that with the public once we figure out, have a better vision of what that construction staging is gonna look like.
Commissioner Hulse.
One, it was not lost on me that that you mentioned the leadership of the Public Works team leading the way. Nice choice of words, by the way.
I don't think you knew he did that.
But
There you go, Brad.
that being said, I also wanted to thank you for the efforts on the business detour signs. on getting that taken care of. I got a number of calls from constituents from up there, so it was greatly appreciated. So thanks very much for everything you did on that.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? I think everything's been said, Andrew.
Thank you.
Appreciate everything.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So the reason we had this update, just FYI, is because we had several things on the consent agenda. And it was timely in case you had questions on consent, but also so Andrew could give you that update. And we'll keep you updated. I mean, it's kind of real time. Literally, Emily's calling Luke right now with an update, and we're pushing where we can. So just we'll keep you updated.
Moving on, item number 7.3, a legislative update and budget implications from Bruce.
Okay, so I'll start with legislative updates first, and then we'll transition to budget. The objective here is getting a little bit of direction from the board so that your staff can put together material now for the July workshops. So we're starting with that, so I'll transition from highlights of the report. If you didn't get a chance, I know it's very long and detailed, but the MICA report is really good, and I'm just going to highlight a few things for you from there. But if you go through it in greater detail, I think that will be, helpful. The overall, the session where it started and where we ended, things ended up appreciably better, but we still went, in my opinion, backwards by statewide several hundreds of millions of dollars of cost shifts, but it was less than it was feared. That being said, I do like the comments that were included in the MICA report about the fact that we still have to think about the next biennium at the state, where they're already looking at over a $2 billion deficit, and that's not including inflation. Now, that may change with revenues and things like that, but the state did not balance the systemic imbalance. So what they deal with next year in correction for this biennium only sets the stage for that second biennium. So it's at this point going to be a continuing conversation for several years. And then in addition, I think the note on the federal budget is also very, very important. In particular, Amanda's watching pretty close at what some of the federal impacts may be. You've already heard some of those come out, in areas of SNAP and Medicaid, but I think they will also impact other departments as well, not just Health and Human Services. So whatever we start talking about, we have to remember these fiscal years and how they impact us. So some of the state changes occur July 1st already. So we're going to be talking about current year budget adjustments, whether they're formal with the board or informal, because the state budget starts July 1st. The federal budget technically starts October 1st. So we might see impacts this fiscal year. And when I talk about what it means for the 26 budget, just know that we're talking about those transitions that have already occurred or that we will have to manage. So it comes into play in several categories. A couple of specific policy areas just wanted to note. For those who are interested, the local sales tax moratorium did end. So when you're with your communities, if they ask about it. What didn't happen is there was conversation about the legislature allowing cities to just go ahead and do a direct voter request. So it's back to business as usual, which is the city has to go to the legislature to ask for permission to ask the voters for a local sales tax. But the moratorium did end, and I know you've asked about that a couple of times, so I did verify that for you. A couple other policy things just to note. There's been a few changes in the registrar and the recorder's area, nothing of huge impact, but Michelle is tracking some things that we'll have to watch for, specifically as it results to officials who are approved to be have or to make their residents' information and their information non-public. And that law is pretty broad, Don, I get that right, so it is also retroactive. So that when those requests come in, it's going to be a pretty detailed and historic scrub of data as well. And there are at this point, no cost reimbursements of substance for that, so it's going to be a time-consuming more than it's going to be a cost-consuming. But obviously, you can see some of the importance of it if you think about the officials that we're dealing with. Also noted is the deputy registrar fees. There are no fee transactions that are required of deputy registrars. They finally are getting addressed with a little bit of state reimbursement. The reason I flagged that to you is because when Lorraine and I come to you with budgets, one of the benefits of our budget exercise is we're thinking outside of the box. And at one time in the past, there was conversations about bringing some of the deputy registrar functions back into the auditor treasurer's functions because they are a greater cost recovery than we are now. And so this will have impacts because at least some of the private deputy registrars basically are saying they can't break even, is I guess the way I would say it. So the fee adjustments that they're dealing with, and some of them affect us in terms of driver's license, are helpful. But again, it's not going to be a panacea for budgets, either for the private entities or for the counties that provide it, or in our case, the counties that provide some of those services, but not all. On the Zimmerman stuff, just a note, and I think this is really interesting, and David asked about this for next week. There was a bill introduced that did not get passed, but would have created a business mitigation fund for businesses disrupted by highway projects. I have that experience in my career because Arizona had a similar project. But if you get asked by businesses, I think it's good that we're starting to see some conversations in Minneapolis or in St. Paul about it. MnDOT actually was opposed because it came in so late they couldn't manage the data requests and figure out how to implement it. I would have liked to see this go to a study group because there are other states that do it, but it's the first time I've seen a bill introduced. So if you do get questions or comments, or when we're on the phone call next week, Dave, with, or is it this week?
It's this week.
Yeah, tomorrow. We can mention that to the businesses as well. And if you're really interested, Senator Hauge, a DFLer from St. Paul, did the introduction of that. So it's possible that could come up again. Bonding was perhaps the most lean bill that was passed. It was a basic lean bill. No local projects were included in that, other than there was one particular St. Cloud area project that was highlighted. But what's interesting is you've seen, and if you see Representative Meekland's email that went out yesterday, he told all of his local agencies, here's what you do. If a city had a project they were seeking, water, wastewater, they need to go to the Public Facilities Authority. Sorry, Rayanne, I know, I know how you feel. And then they said, and if you're looking for road and bridge projects, you got to go to, MnDOT. They're going to manage any type of discretionary funding. So it was kind of the state agencies were funded, not any local agencies. So we are re-upping our requests in the anticipation of the next bonding cycle at the state. And our requests, if you remember, are twofold. One is for 11 and 10, that intersection. And then the second one is for phase 1 and phase 2 development of the regional park. I'm going to skip over HHS. Maybe I'll ask Amanda when we get to the budget if she can extemporaneously help me out a little bit. She and Tony are still going through it a lot, but there's a lot of detailed information here. We did get the 48-hour rule extended, right? No, that sunsetted? So that's okay. We were worrying about that going away. Remember that we got that reprieve for immediate responses, but we'll circle back with that. The other things, a couple small things that we're working on, Don and Keish and I will meet to go over changes to the open meeting law. They've already come into play. The Soil and Water Conservation District had this situation. It basically changes so that if you're remote, it does not have to be in a public space. So Greg, your condo's safe from now on, so, all right. And then there's some public notification requirements. The one that changed was non-substantive, other than if a newspaper goes out of business and that's your official newspaper. But I note that because Wright County is going to be floating a proposal to change public notification requirements, and they've talked to us about it at the staff level. And when we get to our legislative agenda for next year, as well as AMC, I actually think it's a good idea. So we'll probably float it to you for your consideration, knowing that Wright County will ask for some partners. And then that was really some other administrative changes that you may or may not be interested in. Finally, on community corrections, with some budget implications, Corey and his team were successful in getting the formula impacts averaged to 3 years. That just means our step downs are not as dramatic, so we can step down over 3 years versus 1 year. But it was significant. They were not successful, as you can imagine, getting the funding level increased. With that, I thought I'd see if you guys had any questions about the legislative session or things that you were tracking that you wanted to make sure that we discussed here as we move forward? And if not, then I'll transition to the budget.
Transitioning to the budget.
Okay, let me ask first if I missed anything for the department heads that are here, if you guys wanted to highlight anything non-budget related. Don, did you, or, okay. All right, so what I'm gonna do is I'll work off this that I handed out to you in hard copy. This is the update, and lay out for you where we think things are at post-session. And then I'll pose my questions to you, and I'm hoping that we can have some conversation and a little bit more clear direction. So the tables have changed a little bit. The columns, you'll notice the governor proposal, the House proposal, and the Senate proposal for the first half of the page. As I go down, I'm going to be really focusing on those highlighted areas in color. So the first one that was proposed that did not make it into the final bill was the disability waiver shift, a 5% cost for residential waiver services. For us, this was a big item. It was about $1 million. The reason why we're still flagging it to you is this is the one that the legislature said we're going to create a study commission, and they have to find the savings, which was how much, Amanda? $175 million. So they have to find $175 million, or in statute, those shifts automatically go to the counties. Do you remember the timeline for the commission? Is it by next legislative session?
Yeah, because the cost would happen.
Right. So the reason I'm flagging it to you is that TBD, if they fail, that would kick in the next fiscal year, which means the second half of 2026, July 1st. So there's a $500,000 risk on that TBD if you want to pencil that in. Now, it doesn't mean we couldn't, in a dire situation, cover that with, reserves for half of a year, but it's real money. And so when you think about budgeting for 2026, know that that TBD is a real potentiality there. Going down to the purple, cannabis public health aid. Now, this is money that would have gone to the public health units for education. We do know that there was a reduction in that. That just probably translates to reduction of services at this point. I don't think we anticipate that that would hit any staffing, would it?
No, we've experienced a reduction, but it will still cover that one staff.
Right. So at that point, we're talking about less money for education on the cannabis. So that one's probably not I'll call it a life-threatening wound at this point. Going down a little further, you can see, however, that the local government cannabis aid has been eliminated in totality. This is the money that we would have received once registration starts. This is also the funding that we told the cities and the townships that signed up with us that we would receive 75% of it, or if they did the police, 50% of it, which means we're now getting 75% of zero or 50% of zero. At this point, we're not recommending redoing the joint powers agreements. In good faith, we entered into those with our local partners, and we are the lead agency, and we're about, 90% done with getting everything lined up with the cannabis aid joint powers agreements. So I think we go in just knowing that we are not going to get that money back to reimburse us for our costs for managing that program. Where that impacts specifically, Lorraine's office, she will be doing the local registration, planning and zoning, which has to approve or look at all the locations as they come in, and public health, which goes out and does the compliance checks, and the sheriff's office for enforcement, and Don's office should go to court enforcement. So we have impacts across the organization. We have zero revenue at this point coming in. Questions on that? Okay. So if we go to the total right in the middle of the page, you can see that we are looking at potentially well over $2 million in potential cost shifts or increases. That has now been reduced to about $550,000. However, again, I note the TBD flag there. The other two TBDs I also want to note, probably we have to flag one of them, Amanda, right, but not two. These are the ones that Tony and Amanda are looking at. In the middle there, you see the LTC assessment flat reimbursement. This is a change. The state is going to a flat fee to reimburse us versus now it's a graduated or formula-based activity. Is this the one Tony thought wouldn't have as big an impact, or we don't know about this one?
No, I do know.
Okay, if you want to jump up there, so. And then if you also want to handle the mental health case management non-fed fee.
So with min choices, anybody who's on an aging or disability waiver has to go through an assessment process, and it's a fairly lengthy 8-hour assessment process. Two things with that. One good thing, a lot of individuals who have significant disabilities, their condition remains unchanged from year to year, and so we're going to move to a verbal attestation where they can opt, adults only, not children, to have min choices assessment every 3 years as opposed to every 1 year. So that's good. However, right now, how that's paid for is a random moment time study. So it basically covers most of the costs through dollars that we get in the SSTS time study. Now, the state is booking $19 million worth of savings because they're moving that to a flat fee assessment. We have no clue what that flat fee is. By our numbers, we need about $770 per assessment. If the state is booking savings on that, we're just anticipating that that number is going to be lower than what we currently receive for the random moment time study. So good news is less work. Bad news is it's going to be probably significantly less reimbursement.
And then do you want to cover the mental health case management with the non-federal fee?
Yes, and I'm sorry, I don't fully understand this. Tony is the resident expert. At first, this got our hair raised a little bit because our targeted case management is how we fund our mental health case managers, and that's federal, but that would have been a huge number. This is just an expanding eligibility, I believe, to include PTSD, which the private PMAPs already pay for. So when Tony was listening, this is the one we probably understood the least, and then we were listening to that legislative phone call recap last week, and so by our estimations, this is kind of a non sequitur, so really it's not going to have any impact for us.
So taking all that into consideration, again, regardless of what we do with the budget, we feel like there's at least $500,000 there that has to be incorporated in the budget. There's a risk that second half of next year that could go up by at least another $500,000, and depending on what happens with the assessment fee, it could even be more. So whatever your budget strategy is for 2026, make sure that we talk about a plan. Should that strategy be levy what we need, plan for what we might have to get. Now, whether that's reserves or some other thing, that's your choice. But from a minimalist standpoint, we're looking at least at that $550,000 shift at this point. Questions on that before we look at then the prior year? Okay, second half of the table has prior year. These are previous changes. Again, Corey was successful through his association as well as help from AMC and MICA to graduate that fee impact. So we've reduced the impact from about $750,000 down to $475,000 next year. Now you'll notice again, the titles of the columns changed just a little bit in the second half. So we have what was approved in the prior legislative session, and then the House and Senate changes, and then whether they were adopted. So we were successful in both the House and the Senate, and it was adopted to use a weighted average. What I note for you is that half of that 475 reduction comes into play this year. So we did not budget for that reduction, right, Dan, for this year. So our strategy is not at this point to do anything dramatic for this year. We're going to come back to you with a strategy for covering that $238,000 that is going to be short this year, because again, the state budget starts July 1st. So we don't see any fiscal year 2025 implications, but we do see fiscal year 2026. Now, because it's a biennial budget, that 475 probably is a good number to carry forward, but we just haven't seen the final language yet. It is possible that because we will eventually have to get a $750,000 reduction by the formula, it could be possible that one also could have a second year 2026 implication, if you're following me. But at this point, for budgeting purposes, that 475 is probably pretty pretty good target. Then we have the big implications for the Minnesota African American Family Preservation and Child Welfare Disproportionality Act. This is perhaps the biggest change for you to consider at this point. It is law. It was not changed this year. We do not anticipate it's going to be changed next year. Should we proceed as we're planning to fully comply with the law, we're estimating having to staff up about 8.5 FTEs for the effective date, which is January 1st, 2027. So for budgeting purposes, we now listed as TBD for next year. But in reality, if we're going to ramp up to be effective January 1st, 2027, you could anticipate Q4 of next year, we would start having to hire staff, bring them on board, train them. So taking just simple math, that has about a $500,000 implication. It is within the board's prerogative, however, to do several things. First of all, if there's going to be a reasonable legislative push next year, you may choose not to levy in anticipation of that impacting 2026. Again, if we do have to ramp up, we do have the options of reserve funding for that ramp-up period, or you may choose not to be fully ready on January 1st of 2027. Brad's smiling there. So there's a lot of things to think about there, but from a budgeting standpoint, that's why we've shifted it to TBD for you, because really we have until January 1st of 2027. PFMLA remains. The court-appointed new activities, we've just had a placeholder there of $200,000 to cover the cost increases for attorneys. That's not going into Dawn's budget, by the way. I just want to know she's not empire building. That, in fact, is paying other attorneys because of court-mandated or now legislative-mandated activities. Some of these we have no idea how it's going to work. So, for instance, the forensic navigators is new, as well as some of the other court-mandated attorneys. So, taking all that into consideration, we've been tracking about 2.3 million or upwards of 2.9 million of previous year impacts, now looking at least for minimalistic purposes, about 800,000. So if you take all that told, leaving the TBDs as they are and not adding that $1 million in from those two TBDs, we are looking at about a $1.35 million impact from cost shifts from the state over the next, or from the previous two sessions into 2026. I note they'll get worse in 27 at this point. So whatever you do for 26, we'll be talking about this in 26 for 27. For comparison purposes, we looked at the levy impact, and you can see about a 1% shift this year, about a 1.25% shift the previous year. So if we just levied for those cost shifts, we're talking about a little over 2% levy increase. By comparison, because there was conversation in the legislature said, oh, that's why we give you county program aid. Just those 2-year shifts alone would take up over 20% of our CPA, which is already used to buy down the levy, as you know. So it's not a good scenario, but it's the best one that we can develop from the information we have now. So let me stop there, see if you have any questions on the spreadsheet, then we'll go to the conversation questions. Okay, and I'll also open it up for the experts in the room because they're all here. And by the way, Lorraine has got a lot of anxiety whenever I say use reserves, because reserves use reduces revenue without the investment income. So if I say, oh, take $1 million out of reserves, she's like, right? There goes 4%, right? So there's implications of using reserves even in those two TBD factors. But again, you levy up, you can replace those reserves, but you just have to be conscious of the levers you're using. Dan, did you want to add anything before we shift at this point?
We'll see what the questions are.
I would note a couple of positives, but again, these are cautious positives. One is our healthcare costs are coming in not as high as we feared. and that's at least somewhat helpful. But that's tempered by the fact that we still have open negotiations, so you know where that's at. And the other one is we did get in this year some local transition aid for the closure of Sherco. But again, that aid was already anticipated to reduce the cost shift that was going to occur anyhow. And the cost shift would go from industrial users to residential users. So that's just simply a cost shift. Well, if we absorb it to cover our costs and still raise the levy, that cost shift will essentially still occur. Does that make sense? Okay. How'd I do, Dan? Was that pretty accurate?
Pretty accurate. It's the solar that'll change the class. This was a one-time payment that came in to offset the state losses that you talked about before.
Gotcha,
So
gotcha. It's one time.
solar that's the shift.
Solar is a shift. So the one time is also the note that I forgot to highlight. We have no guarantee that's going to come in next year. So again, if you use it this year, we might be talking next year again, building it. So a lot of these things are one-time versus recurring, and I think we have to talk about those. So you want anything else then? Yeah, we are seeing a slight uptick in solar revenue, so that is accurate. So maybe that would be the third somewhat positive, right?
Right, we get an energy production tax. We will see that go up. The Sherco 1 went online in October, so we'll see some of that in 2025. It'll be a full year of that, plus a portion of Unit 2 in 2026. So there will be a couple $100,000 of revenue from that. So that is a positive to go along with the health insurance.
Okay. Yeah, the other bad news is that when we hired Drew, he said he had a bag of money coming from St. Paul. It didn't show up yet. He said it got stolen on I-94, right? Is that? Okay. So where we're at with the budget prep and then the questions. At this point, we are foregoing building what I'll call the descriptive portion of the budget. That's the narrative portion. Because I think that the potential outcome from budgeting is so wide, it's probably not a good exercise for directors. So when you do get your draft budget, it'll be a detailed budget, but it's going to not have that narrative. That's kind of the direction we've given out at this point. The three scenarios that we've asked the staff to prepare for July for you are as follows. Scenario 1 is what we're basically calling our status quo or base budget. The idea is that operations are generally going well. You want to know what the cost will be to continue those operations. Now, what you do to build that is you take a look at this year's budget, and then you make the changes that the board have already approved. So if we've added staff, that's included. If a program sunsets, it goes away. So ARPA would go away. It's not going to be reflected in that budget. Now the statutory things are the ones that we would take a look at, but basically status quo. For all intents and purposes, since you haven't actually approved, I don't think, any hiring of staff this year. Have we done any this year in the first 4 months?
There was one in the attorney's office that was brand new.
Okay, so you remember last year we had some mid-year hires. This year we really haven't, and part of that has been our philosophy, which is very aware of those changes. Any staffing replacements, we've been very deliberative. And we've actually been holding several positions in the anticipation of some budget changes.
And that was a budgeted position. That was not one that was added during.
Right, so you have added 0 positions this year to basically what I'll call the base budget. And the big change is ARPA goes away completely. So that is gone off the budgets, which means there's some cost shifts in the status quo budget. But for rough numbers, that's the one we've been telling you is probably, if you just look at personnel costs, known inflationary costs, the ARPA shifts, you're probably talking in that 6.5% to 7% levy range. That's kind of where we think the status quo budget is at. Is that fairly good, Dan? You okay with that?
I would say it's a little lower because of the health insurance changes.
Okay, well, you're being
We're
nice
at about
today.
7 with the health insurance. We're in that lower 6 now.
Okay, so we'll go 6 to 6.5 then. And that's status quo. The second thing we did is we asked the departments to consider how they would do status quo, but accommodate the shifts from the legislature. So that basically, $800,000. Now, the downside was when we first started the budget analysis, the shifts were fairly significant and across several departments. Now they're not. So if I stay with what the staff is doing, you're going to see the biggest impacts, obviously, in Health and Human Services and in corrections. So if we do the status quo plus absorbing the cost shifts, we have to figure out how to do that. So my recommendation from the board would be, if this is where you want to go towards, is to say, okay, status quo is going to be 6%. We were talking about a 2% absorption minimum of the state shifts, so that's 8. We don't like that. So you have to absorb the 2% in the 6% is basically, so it'd be status quo plus those absorptions. Make sense? So we'll just say that's the 6% plus the 2%. That would be how I would recommend it versus just saying, guess what, Amanda, you got to find, you know, basically $500,000 and you alone, and Andrew skates because he just has to build the status quo budget. So we would look at that and how that's equalized. And as a staff, what we look at also is the levy-dependent departments. So to give you an example, Dawn is 95% levy funded. Admin is 99% admin funded.
Close.
Andrew's probably 30%.
In that range, yeah.
Yeah, because he gets a lot of money, you know. Joel, because of the enterprise fund, it's a mix. So originally we thought departments absorb it. Now I would say that as we come to you with that middle scenario, it's going to be, this is continuity of operations absorbing the state cuts. So then I would look for some sort of rational basis. I might say, hey, Don, you need to come in at 5%, not at 4, because she's so levy dependent. The third scenario that we developed was trying to get absorption of the cost shifts plus a more austere target, and that one we chose based upon prior board conversations just for development at 3%. So what a 3% levy would look like is, again, a 3% plus the cost shifts of 2% and whether those are absorbed or not. You following me? So that could basically be almost effectively a 1% levy because I would shift those state shifts as equitable as I can across all the departments. So coming into July, we've been looking at those 3 scenarios with each department. My intent is between today and July, I would make that modification for scenarios 2 and 3. I would say the shifts are not going to be just in Amanda's and Corey's departments. We have to look at what's fair, but that would be the only adjustment, and then come in and have a conversation with you about that. So my first question is does that equity make sense when it comes to how to handle those cost shifts instead of just 2 departments, to figure out a way that's fair across all departments? And then the second question for the board is, of those 3 scenarios, where's your comfort level? Are we too high, too low? In other words, you want to get to a 0? Or, where should we be spending our efforts here as we come forward? I will end on this note. We've had this conversation before. The exercise of austerity is not always a negative exercise. The conversations that I've been privy to, that Dan has been privy to, I think have been actually sometimes healthy, if not creative. And I think regardless of where the county board comes out, I think you will hear, because I still want to present all 3 of these scenarios in some form or fashion, you're going to hear some pretty creative ideas. I'm going to give you one just so you understand the progression, and it's only one of multiple ones. But early on, Amanda and Corey had a conversation because in their world there are models where community corrections falls directly under Health and Human Services. Now, whether that's physically under, organizationally under, doesn't matter. But there was value in looking at that because potentially the formulas that fund a lot of Amanda's department, which are state and federal funding, maybe could apply to Corey's staff if organizationally they were in the same organization. It took some time and effort and staff to review that. Originally, we thought it might have low 6-figure savings, not immaterial. The end result was it doesn't, but we did the effort. We looked into it. Okay, good effort. But the conversation has led to a follow-on conversation that there might be sharing of staffing across the departments that could lead to efficiencies. So that, for instance, between the two organizations, there could potentially be one or even two personnel savings by how the staff work with each other and what the staffs do, if that makes sense. And so when we come to you, we're going to come with those types of ideas. If it makes sense to change the boxes, we may have some good ideas. If it makes sense to change what we do, we may have some good ideas. Or if we've come up with other ideas, we're going to present those to you. So there's some creativity behind this. And then the last thing I'll say is also, I think at the end of the day, the other thing we're going to make sure you understand are what are the mandated and non-mandated services, and what are the levy-funded and non-levy-funded services. Because we really don't have a lot of non-mandated services. We have a few. Driver's license would be one that Lorraine and I are still struggling to get an answer on, because it's not sure it's mandated, but if we don't do it, there's a void in service. We don't know what the state would say if we said, we're not going to do it. You know, does that mean people in Sherburne County have to drive to St. Cloud or Monticello or Buffalo to get their driver's license? You may say it's a public service. We don't care if it's levy funded, but it's about half levy funded. Or we could come back and say, you know, maybe we should see about bringing full services, the deputy registrar services in here, because they're more fee funded and that reduces levy. So we might actually spend more levy but get more revenue and enhance services. You follow the logic there. So we're trying to look at the organization from several different layers for you here, but our emphasis are on those three different scenarios. So it looks like I tickled Rayanne, so I'll let her jump in before I go back to my two questions.
The only thing I wanted to clarify was you cannot get a driver's license in Monticello. You would have to go to Buffalo.
Yeah,
The only
I
thing you
misspoke.
can do in Monticello is change your address.
Yeah, sorry about that. All right, so, yeah, sorry. So the two questions again are, do the scenarios make sense that we're focusing on, and are you okay with that cost shift? So it's not going to be just Amanda and Corey for how we handle these $800,000. And the second question is where of those three scenarios do you see right now, at least, where your comfort level is, knowing what the legislature has done and knowing what the future holds?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Holz.
So I just want to recap to make sure that I'm understanding the three scenarios. So what I heard was, from a levy standpoint, the three scenarios as they were laid out, total net levy increase. The most austere version would be a net levy increase of 3%, absorbing all cost shifts. The next scenario would be roughly a 6% levy increase, again absorbing the cost shifts within that 6%. And then the other end of that would be roughly an 8% levy increase, which would be levying for the state cost shifts plus the status quo. Is that a reasonable recap?
Yes, with the exception I'd numbered them opposite years. So my one was, I'll call it the 8%, my 2 was the 6, and my 3 was the 3. And that's just because I'm a bureaucrat and I'm going to give you, my preference is 1. The other thing that I would suggest we have to keep in mind, and we don't know the answer to this, is what are our neighbors doing and what are other states doing, or other counties, statewide. So for instance, on that big MAFPA, although we have another year to think about it, if 87 counties say we're going to do the best we can with the resources we have, but we're not going to hire 8 people, we do that alone, the spotlight's on us. We do it with 40 other counties, it's a different scenario. The same thing, if we take a position on the levy, let's say that other counties don't, that may have implications down the road, whether that's for staffing, recruitment, retention, whatever. So I don't have the externalities today, but you got the numbers correct other than.
Mr. Chair, just for clarification to Andrew's point, scenario number 1, scenario number 2, understand. Scenario number 3, now you had talked about with that 3% levy and absorbing the 2% state shifts, you were talking a 1%. How did that play out?
Yeah, Commissioner Halls used the word net. What it means is that basically the local county-only increase would be 1%, and we'd absorb the 2%. So it's still a net levy increase of 3%, but the impact there is you're paying for the state cost shifts out of that 3%. Versus the middle scenario, you could change these too. You could say, we're comfortable with 3%, but we don't think the state shifts are fair or so on the organization, so we want you to be at 5%. That's a middle, between the two scenarios. But laying out kind of the top, middle, it's the too hot, too cold, just right, or in this case, it's however you define those, yeah.
And in this discussion and the thought process on what we're looking at doing, you had also mentioned in the beginning of this whole conversation to make sure that we keep our eye to the 2027 and what's coming at us. How are you teeing us up here in regards to what will hit us in 2027? I like to see the big picture over a couple of years. I don't want us to get too tight and then have to possibly be forced to do something we don't want to do in 2027. So I like to see this big picture all together with that possible 2-year thought process in front of us.
Yeah, and that's why we want to talk about one-time versus recurring. So at this point, from a risk assessment standpoint, I think there's potentially $1 million that could impact next year's budget that we don't know for sure, that we would have to ramp up in 27. So if we build the base this year, all of those recurring revenues would occur with the exception of the one-time transition aid. So that's another $500,000. But going forward, if we use that one-time funding next year, then we have to replace it with levy dollars in 27. So my recommendation would be that we build the base for the operations. If you're going to be conservative, I'll say on the levy, because you could also argue you're conservative by building the levy a little bit more now and having that ready. But if you're going to be conservative in the levy, then again, I want you to know the risks even for next year, which is, okay, we may, if this disability waiver committee crashes, we may have to start spending money next year. And that means you have to build your levy increase or cut staff or programs. So anything we do at this point, I anticipate highlighting for you, whether it's one-time or systemic. So for instance, the personnel conversations you're going to have with some departments, because they will talk personnel, not just programming. Our argument to the departments are make sure you're talking permanent, not just one time. Because the one-time fix just makes it worse next year. So we are keeping an eye towards 27. I think the biggest near-term thing that we have to continue to watch now that the state is done is what's happening with the feds. And, we might even know more in the next 2 weeks. But those implications at this point will first have implications on programming, then on staffing.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Holmes.
So I'll jump in first and give you my thoughts. Feel free to scowl as necessary. That goes for you guys too. First of all, I like the scenarios as you've laid them out. So for your first question, from my perspective, that's good head work, the way you've got them laid out. From a comment on the budget impacts, the one challenge that I always have with a spreadsheet exercise like this is this always shows the increases, program increases. It doesn't, a spreadsheet like this doesn't show the things we're going to choose not to do in order to absorb those costs. But you've already covered that in your scenarios.
So I think that's fine, but that's something that needs to be taken into account too. Not just, okay, this is what the increases are, but okay, what are we going to stop doing, right, in order to absorb some of these costs?
Yeah, the one exception I'd say is that $30,000 for cannabis aid. You know, that's going to have to be absorbed by staff. So that 30,000, if you said we're going to cover it, you know, it's such a small amount, it's not one position. That one, I can tell you right now how we're going to absorb it. I mean, Lorraine's going to have to figure out how to do the licensing. Public health is going to pair up the tobacco with the, you know, with those compliances. That's one that we already know we'll just absorb. So.
Yeah, no, I get that. So from a scenario standpoint, I like the direction that you're heading. I like the 3 scenarios. I think those are done well. And I've already said my piece on the increases versus also thinking about what we're not going to do. The one piece I would add, you talked about mandated services versus non-mandated services. The other piece of that is service level requirements, right? Because we may have mandated services that have various service level requirements and some that don't, that we have to consider maybe the service levels become worse because they're not mandated versus some services that have more strict mandate. The MAA FPCWDA project?
Read it out?
Absolutely not. That one, we had a discussion on that one specifically at the District 5 meeting. I think that's something that we're going to have to hold off and see a little bit. Now, my general budget philosophy, so I'll give you my 2 cents on this. And you and I have talked about this before, but I'll say it for the department heads. What I don't want to do personally, just me, I don't want to go through and approve a bunch of individual projects or a bunch of individual department budgets. I agree with the philosophy that if whatever we do with the levy needs to be fairly adjusted across all departments. I think that is a discussion that needs to take place at the department head level and with the senior staff. I've told you this story before. When I was a young executive and we were going through some tough times in the early 2000s, you know, I got told, okay, we're going to do a 10% budget decrease across the board. You guys got to go figure it out. And in exasperation, as a young, relatively hot-headed executive, I said, okay, well, you tell me where to cut. And my boss said, well, I can do that, but you won't like it. And he wasn't doing it out of being punitive. What he followed up by saying is he said, look, I know what, as a business, we can afford. You know how to stretch the dollars as far as they can possibly be stretched within your budgets, and your department heads know that. So I'm not going to make those cuts, or I'm not going to make those changes. I want you, as the experts, to stretch those dollars as far as you can possibly stretch them. I said, okay, so I got that. So that was a good lesson learned. And that's generally my philosophy here. I'm going to, from my perspective, agree to a levy increase that I think is fair to the county as well as fair to the community and to our constituents. I'm not going to tell you how to spend that money. My expectation is going to be you and the experts, the department heads, are going to figure out how to stretch those dollars as far as you can stretch them. I do think, and I like where your discussion has been around some systemic changes. I would like whatever budget we come up with for this scenario, whether it's something that, wherever it is in that range, that as an organization, we plan it in such a way that whatever that number is, whether it's 3% or 5% or 6%, whatever it is, that we view that as we want to set up the organization structurally so it's sustainable from that number, whatever that number is. And then we can talk about, as we go around the room, what our bracketing is from each of our comfort levels. And that'll sort of give you an idea on where things will likely fall out. But that's my philosophy.
Gary, if I can just jump in real quick. Just a couple of things to add flavor to that. I'm going to pick on Drew because he's in the room here. So I like the conversation about service levels because actually he just went through this where, as a new department head, he took a look at what his staffing and his budget allows for service level and reviewed it, and he's reviewing it department by department for service level expectations, which is pretty typical in the IT world. They call them SLAs or service level agreements. I can respond in 24 hours for these types of situations. Computer doesn't work, how do you respond? Computer's slow, different response. So we do have some in-house knowledge, and I appreciate you flagging that. I think the one issue you already kind of flagged as well, which is the type of services. I want to give you two examples of where we're having conversations. One is obviously on MAFPA, which is, how do you say it?
We just call it MAFPA.
MAFPA, okay. Which is this idea that the state is actually mandating affirmative responses versus, well, I don't know what we called previous responses. I thought they were affirmative before, but they're saying you got to be more proactive. That's, again, that conversation response levels. We've already had the conversation, and what we're sharing is the dollars and cents. So Tammy calculated with Dan how much PFMLA is going to cost us in terms of payroll reduction. And that's one I should have flagged too. That's only a half-year cost, the 125.
Right, because we budgeted this year.
That will go up to 250 in 27. So Rayanne, that's one of those that I should have flagged to you, and I apologize. I didn't show a 27 column, but I'll add it for future conversations because you're flagging a good point. But in that case, we've already had the conversation. We know we have to pay out of payroll. But what do we do if on any given day, on demand, we have one person on vacation and driver's license, and Lorraine gets in the morning and somebody calls and says, I'm going to take PFMLA today, on demand. They can do that under law. No excuses, no doctor's note, nothing. We might have to have a sign that says, we're sorry, due to PFMLA, we can't service you today. I mean, that's a service level expectation that we're already thinking, because otherwise the argument is we're going to overstaff. Do we do that in driver's license? Probably not. Do we do that with deputies? Probably. Because right now, even before PFMLA, we're pulling investigators off of investigations to put them in patrol, just because of people out on FMLA, training, scheduled leave. So we're already running at an op tempo even before PFMLA on essential services that we have to be more in tune to. But that's kind of the service level expectations that we're going to talk about. How do we meet customer expectations? Right now we get people mad because they walk in and we say, we use appointments, we take walk-ups as we can, it's a 2-hour wait, and they get mad at us. Their expectations are different than our reality. They want service on demand. We just aren't staffed for it. And of course, then they go back there and they see 3 windows open, not 4. Well, why isn't it open? Well, because we have to accommodate other things. So yeah, that's the conversation. I appreciate that. And also that's more at the department level, and hopefully you don't hear a lot of that. And then again, the other thing that mentioned is, in addition to what other counties do, I don't want to lose sight of that communication. Whatever you decide, I'd like to communicate, whether it's in the newsletter, on the tax bill. Again, a 2% levy increase that says state imposed isn't a bad thing in my opinion. So I didn't want to lose sight on that. So thanks for letting me jump in.
Anyone else? I guess for me, I like the scenarios. I agree with Andrew. I think the scenarios are good. One thing I would like to see, if possible, is what does that break down per resident on average for industrial, commercial, and residential property? You know, what are their costs? If for either one of those scenarios, what would they be? I think that would be helpful. Can't hurt. So I think that would be good.
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Felber.
Yeah, I want to do what we can to absolutely ensure we're being as tight with our budget as we can, but I also, particularly in Health and Human Services and in our law enforcement, I don't want to be hiring the deputies who are taking the test for the third time. I don't want those people. I know who they are. It used to be, like when I took the test, when I first got licensed, more than 50% of the people who would graduate from the skills programs never got hired, and there was a reason for that. So that's an actual concern for me, that that we're still able to maintain that level of service. I don't want in Health and Human Services and in corrections, community corrections, to pretend that massive increases in client caseloads are actually feasible. I mean, there are other counties in the state to cut money. They're going to 60, 70 people on high-risk supervision. That's not feasible. You know, so I want to make sure that while we're doing this, that, you know, particularly, I mean, there's other things we can cut, and but I really want to make sure that those very client-focused, very public safety-oriented things, that we don't lose the quality of service there while we're doing this. You know, there's some other things that doesn't matter, but as much. But when it comes to actually, with Health and Human Services, if we're not doing our job right, people get sick, people die. Same thing with community corrections, same thing with law enforcement. So I just want to make sure we don't lose sight of that while we're trying to deal with some of this absurd budget shifts from the state.
You say BS.
Well, and
Politically correct, that's all right. Way to go.
And you raised a point too, which again goes into that to be determined, is the whole Stillwater prison and the shift, and what's the act that, the 50% serve time act or whatever the.
Yeah, the MRRA.
Yeah, and I know Corey's working on that, so part of his budget will address those two questions. So no, those are fair comments. I appreciate them. I hear Corey running down the hall to applaud, but that's okay, you know. So Joel's already here or was there. So.
What else? Commissioner Schumacher.
Well, thanks for having me. So the
See, you can't blame the previous board anymore now. This is you.
Okay, I will say this, going back to what Andrew had said. You know, I come in. Well, let's pick on Drew. I'll go back to Drew in the back because I'm new. Drew's new, and giving it just a new look or a new process. Andrew, Commissioner Andrew, had said, you know, worse service levels. I wouldn't say worse service levels. I would use the phrase, we are an envy in Sherburne County, the staff that we have, and the ability of service that we deliver is exceptional. And when you look at it from the outside of a community that saddles two other counties, and no offense against Isanti County, they do a great job. No offense against Black's County, they do a good job with what they've got and the money and the people that they have and the resources. We do it the best. We deliver it at a pace. When you look at it from the outside looking in, we do it well. And to live here and have that zip code and then that county is honorable and proud to do that. I look at the process of this budget and what's gone on and the political environment that we're in, and you know, like no difference on Health and Human Services, but I'm also in the process that says I'm going to protest and go back to the governor and say, we do it better than anybody else, and nobody can keep up with us. And I'm willing to go on strike and say, take it back. If Health and Human Services is a state-funded, state-mandated process, Governor, you do it. I'm not going to pay for your cost shifts anymore. I'm on this end of it. Not because we don't do it well, because we do it the best. And our Health and Human Services, instead of us being on their payroll, let them be on the state payroll. And let's rent them the space to do health and human services in our county. So it is an even experience across 87 counties. I will say this, we do it best. Amanda and all of her staff do a fantastic and great job. No different than the process, whether, you know, I brag about our public works. It's our staff that makes the difference. It's how we fund it, and it's how it's experienced. And so I'm in the process of, if we add it on, that's fine. I'm also in the process of holding my feet to the ground and going zero levy increase, because I'm just irritated at the process of the governor. The governor has failed this state. He's a failed leader across this country, and he will not make it through another election. And we're going to have a new governor, a new leader in our state. And I believe that because I watched him fall apart in the congressional hearings where our state representatives, our state congressmen asked him the questions like, do you find this to be politically correct? Do you find this to be peaceful? He can't make a decision that's right. And he's not making them right for our state. He's making them for his political future in the future, which isn't going to be in our state anymore. And so I feel we're going to have a new governor. I feel like the budget's going to change. We're going to get new leadership. And I'm in the process of going on strike and telling the governor and the leadership, hey, this is your guys' baby, and you can't cost shift it to the taxpayers. Just like when you said that in legislative, we can't charge for probation officers, right? We can't change the fees, but you know what we can always do? Just keep raising property taxes, and people are tired of that. The people who paid their property taxes, they didn't commit a crime. It's the person that's on probation that should pay the fee, and the fee can't come from anywhere else but property taxes. It's just too much for too long, and that's my 2 cents on it. But I do think, going back to Bruce and to Dan and to all the staff management that's here, you guys do a fantastic job, and we lead the state, in my opinion, and I'm biased, in the delivering the best services for the residents of our community. I really, truly do. And some of it just got to stop. It's got to stop and go back to the state to say, and it's up to us to lead the way and say, Sherburne County is going to stand our ground and say, no, we'll go on strike with how many other counties we can get together, band together, and say, you guys got to make a difference. We're standing firm as an association of counties to say no more taxes, no more burden cost shift to us. And if you want us to do the work, we'll keep doing it, but send us the money. That's all I got. Bruce, sorry. Well, you knew it was coming. I already told the administrator.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Danielowski.
I think we all agree with your thoughts. And I think that at the same time, this is going to obviously resonate we're all taxpayers. And it is starting to get noticed at a very high level that people have to speak out. They have to start pushing back, and they need to be helping us push back. I don't necessarily think zero is the answer, because people will get hurt in that meantime. But I think it's definitely going to be a march of this has got to change. And we've been talking about it for the last couple of years about trying to get how things are funded changed. But it's a process. But I think that is getting to that level where people are saying, you're right, enough is enough. But I just want to make sure we're cautious on what it is our roles are at the moment, and making sure that we are doing everything we can to bring a budget in that is going to still serve the people that we serve, and at the same time do it in a way that we can be as fiscally responsible for the taxpayers. But at the same time, we need to be gathering those voices. And I like what was being said about, we put it in the property tax statement. This percentage here is a direct reason from the state. And we need to voice our opposition to these shifts.
And if I could, Mr. Chairman, just go off that one more time. At the legislative meeting, I had brought up, and I really do believe that, and adding it to the bottom of the statement, and I said, double it down and ask Andrew, the superintendent of Elk River Schools, just add his in there too. I know you don't want to cloud the two together, but when someone sees that on their statement, it'll be more recognizable. And so that's how I came up with that idea, is that sometimes they think of county boards as fat cats, and they don't listen. You know, it doesn't seem like we're banging on the pan loud enough, but when the school district sometimes does it, the pan's a little louder and people are listening, you know, and they're more apt. And so that's why I had said that. I also wanted to just commend the Auditor Treasurer's Department for the increase of interest year-to-date received. Because I got it pulled up here. If you guys didn't know I was ready for this part, but I want to just talk about that. And Lorraine's not smiling because she can kind of read through the lines of how I'm thinking we're going to fund the differences.
I want you to reduce that fund.
That there, but that's, sorry, but you know where I'm coming from. And I'm not saying less, I'm saying shift, you know, cost shift to cover. New administration coming in, I feel it, right, from everybody I meet in the public. But that way you guys kind of see how I have it pulled up here. I mean, just in case anybody would miss what I had pulled up.
You just got to remember though, we got to do 2 budgets before the next election. So.
I know. We're going to see that.
And we also only have, you know, most of our settlements are only for 2 years. So, yeah, it'll be interesting. The one thing I should tell you about Lorraine is, whenever we have conversations about investment, she just, you know, she's really good about reminding us, like, you know, the 2 easy levers that you can pull on a short-term adjustment. It's like, oh, well, we'll just bump up interest income. Well, you know, we did that during COVID, and we were close, you know. So every time I say, well, can we squeeze another 100,000? She, you know, gives me the stink eye because we're betting on the market there. So you know how risky that is. The other one is, and Felix isn't here, but you know, we used to always budget for the dividend from MCIT, and we always want to bump it up 100,000, and it's like there's no guarantee, you know. So you guys remember that as well. Yeah.
Commissioner Hulse.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, just 2 comments on that. One is, this goes back to the one statement that I made. Whatever percentage land, it's important to me that the department heads go in with that number, thinking that they're going to set up their organizations to be sustainable at that number, whether it's 3% or 5% or 7% or whatever it is, right? So that's one thing I want to make. I don't want one-time, unless it's there. A couple of things could be one-time things, but I don't want the budget to hinge on one-time things or interest or something like that, right? Mm-hmm. The second piece is and it's something that, pardon me, that Commissioner Felber brought up. I believe in our total rewards philosophy. And what that means to me is that when we hire people where we think we're competitive from a total compensation standpoint. So, but that also can mean that we may not have the total number of people that we would ultimately desire to have. So I want to make sure that the people that we do have are, you know, that we're competitive, right? And that's something that I'm used to in the past as well. Yeah, my organizations, we were competitive from a total compensation standpoint, but I didn't necessarily have the total number of people that I always wanted. So I just want to differentiate that a little bit. My last question. So Bruce, are you wanting a range from each of us to give you an idea on where everybody's head's at? Or what do you want?
You know, I think actually I've got a pretty good flavor.
Because I'm at -40.
Yeah, I know. I think the only hard one is
good. Glad for you.
I just want to make everybody laugh.
You know, I mean, I think the only hard one there is, you know, Brad says 0 levy, and of course I'm thinking to myself 0 plus the 2% or minus the 2%, or, you know, build the organization, but you know, there's some things that we might not do, which is fair. So I mean, I'll follow up with you one-on-one on that. But I think what I heard was within those scenarios. And obviously, I mean, I have my own thought about what's doable and sustainable. But I think your point is well taken, and actually I'm going to meld a couple comments with Greg's comments, and I'll pick on Corey because he's not here. You know, at one point, that is the conversation. Could he absorb a $475,000 reduction? Because right now, we don't give levy dollars to that department. That's no fault of Corey. That was a formula adjustment that kicked in from 2023. You know, should we have known it? Could we have known it? Maybe, but that's, you know, that's hindsight. That's an after-action review. More importantly is, do we know going forward? But, you know, $475,000 is probably 4 people, 3 people. Caseloads might go from 55 to 75. Is that a good service level? Is that good for our staff? I don't know. You know, that's something you guys get to discuss with Corey. You know, obviously he's advocating for the fact that we run a really good department, and we didn't hire 16 people when the state finally increased it. We hired 2. How we manage that, I think, comes back to that conversation. So it might be in fewer people. What I like about, and again, this is why I'm picking on Corey, what I like about his analysis is not bodies, caseloads, it's what could we do differently that might allow us to absorb a fewer people but still keep the caseloads low. And in that particular case, he's talking about how we do UAs. Greg, what's a UA?
Your analysis.
Yeah, I know.
Checking for drug
Right,
use.
right. So it's for those of us who are not in the business, it's your analysis. Right now, we have to staff based upon essentially, I'll call it gender. There is a potential that there might be a programmatic / technical fix that allow that to be done unisex. That may have staffing implications. So it's a service change that may result in that without impacting caseload. That's creative thinking. That's thinking forward. That's what I really like versus saying you're going to go to 75 on your caseload, you know. So I really appreciated the fact that that came up as an example, because it's also one where the progression, the sophistication of the conversation is not just a number or a budget. It's how do we do business? How is it sustainable? Maybe with fewer people, you know. And every department is doing that. I'm just using a few people to give examples of that. What I don't want to have this become is a conversation that we have like, okay, Andrew, we're going to go from 6-inch lift to 4-inch lift to save asphalt. Can we do it? Yeah. Are we going to be fixing that road in 15 years versus 30 years? Or 10 versus 20, probably more likely? Yeah. You know, that's penny wise, pound foolish, those kind of things. Or when Ted was here, do we stop maintaining the building because it saves money next year when we know down the road we're going to have huge issues? So I'm really impressed with the conversation you've had. I'm impressed with the staff. I think the direction's pretty clear. And, you know, I expected a couple of you are going to be, you know, here, or in this case, you know, Brad's here. You know, and a couple of you are going to be more comfortable when we say this is what it takes to do continuity of operations. So I don't want to pin you down, you know, at this point. But I do feel comfortable with the fact that I'm not going to ask just Amanda and Corey to absorb the state shifts. I'm going to figure out a way that I think makes sense with the department heads, because I heard you tell me this isn't a Dan exercise, a Bruce exercise, this is a department exercise. So, and when we come in, we're going to be covering those 3 scenarios then, okay?
And just for clarification, you will bring this back with a 2-year look, so we are setting ourselves up for the next year as well.
Yeah, I'll do a 27 projection so you can see where we know things are going to kick in. You know, and then I think the question is, for those where you've already decided it is a service issue, then it's, do we increase the levy in 26 or do we wait until 27? So, yeah.
Well, I think we'll just, you know, end on the fact that I appreciate everyone's opinion and comments. And I think one of the underlying things that I got out of all of this was that in every one of our comments was the human factor in some capacity, whether that be staff or our residents, that we have to take into consideration. We all got there in different ways, but I think in hindsight, I think the human factor we have to weigh into all of this is the important thing, that it'll affect staff, it'll affect residents, and how we do this. And, you know, I spent 38 years in business and staff was the mainstay. You know, we had to have our employees. If we didn't, our level of service went down, and that's important. And I think that has to be the underlying factor in this. You know, we have to have the staff to provide the service that we are capable of doing. Brad's comments, Greg's comments, all regards to staff and importance of the people and our residents. And I think that we can't let that go. This is not an easy thing for any of us, but I think we'll get there. I like the scenarios. I think we gave Bruce direction, Dan direction. I think we'll get there, but it's going to be a challenge. So with that, we'll move on.
And just,
quick thing?
yeah, and just go ahead and then I'll jump in.
I think we should include Peach in all lobbying activities, because I don't think anybody can say no to her. I don't know, is that viable?
Therapy dog for the commissioners when we're going through budget talks might be a better way to put it.
The reason we brought her in here today.
Thank you.
We'll bring her to Washington. They can't say no. I'm just saying.
And just keep reminding Drew that we're waiting for that money bag, so.
From St. Paul. All right. I think we're on to commissioner correspondence.
Did you guys want to take your break early? I don't know how you're all doing, or if you want to push through this first, so.
Anybody want a break?
Why don't we do this, and then we'll take a break before the workshop.
Yep.
Okay. We'll start off with Commissioner Schumacher.
Oh, yeah, down here. I got
30
it right
seconds each.
Oh, yeah, mine's easy.
30 seconds each.
I got that. Hold on.
Timer, yeah. It'll
It
go
goes
off on
back
it.
to lot going on in District 5 between the road construction and constituent conversations, both in Princeton and Zimmerman. I think our Public Works is doing really well. They've been responsive on getting back the information that's being given to them and responding back. So very well. Correspondence both in Zimmerman and Princeton jurisdictions on both of those. The County Board of Appeals and Equalization meeting that we went to, that we all did, I felt that was very good, and I felt that the assessor staff did, like I'd said at that time, they did really well. And then I missed the solar panel tour thing that we went to, but fortunately I did get stuck on County Road, crossing the bridge to see it from County Road 24, 20.
25?
Yep, 25, yeah. That's gonna be a beautiful facility. I sat there on the bridge and I just got to look across and see all the solar panels about ready to be. So I did get a solar panel tour in this process. It was just from the highway, stuck in traffic. 24, on 24, yep. All I could see from 24 was the solar tax revenue, wherever Dan is, right here. I just want to know what solar tax revenue from that project's going to be distributed throughout the county. 30 seconds is up. Thank you for having me.
Okay.
Commissioner Hulse, you get the next 30 seconds.
All right, so we all did the AMC District 7 meeting on the 9th. On the 10th, I had community corrections as well as the tech steering committee meeting, which we'd already started talking about budgets in the community corrections meeting. I did the Excel Energy tour. I thought that was interesting. What impressed me most about the solar tour was that they're actually making plate rate on the solar fields, which frankly I was shocked because I'd never heard of a solar field making anything close to plate rate. So that was pretty interesting. We had, of course, we all had the County Board of Equalization on the 17th as well. Had the call with Congressman Emmer's staff on the 18th, and then and I think those were the main meetings that we had. I think that'll cover it.
You get the next 30. Yep.
Attended the same AMC District 5 meeting on the 9th that everybody's referred to. On the 11th, I zoomed in on an AMC solar and wind learning event. I found that extremely interesting because they also hit wind, of which we don't hear a whole lot of up here. Also attended my local township, Big Lake Township meeting that evening. On the 12th, had our Central Mississippi River Partnership meeting. Also attended the Area Planning Organization, otherwise known as the APO board meeting up in St. Cloud. On the 13th, had my MnDOT 7W transportation meeting up in St. Cloud. Was able to attend the options summer barbecue event at Options Incorporated. On the 17th, attended a NACO Central Regional meeting by Zoom. Also did the County Board of Appeals and Equalization. On the 18th, attended the Sherburne County Substance Use Prevention Coalition meeting. Also was able to go up and attend the ribbon cutting ceremony for the 1010 project up in St. Cloud. That was a very interesting, I mean, I think they're gonna have some good results off of that project up there. Got to tour where our Health and Human Service rooms are in that facility, and it was just really, really nice to see, and hoping that that will be what they want to do, and that's change that neighborhood dynamic. So, also on the 19th, I had a Zoom call with the Ice Association in Big Lake that is looking to try to fund a ice arena. On the 23rd, had my options board meeting. I also did a number of constituent issues, and one of the ones I want to highlight is I received a contact from the secretary of the Big Eagle Lake Improvement Association out there on Big Eagle Lake, and they were really wanted to praise. They recently had received excellent information regarding shoreland alterations from Sherburne County, and that went around to every shoreland owner. And they were very impressed. They said that they were looking to see if they could maybe make copies of what was sent to them and put them in their welcome packets, because they have not found anything from the DNR that had as much good information as what should have come from I had her connect with Mark Schneider in Planning and Zoning just to let them know how much they appreciated that. They were looking to want to replicate it. Also learned that we as a county, probably on a cycle of over 7 years, they send out this information and they try to hit all the lakes in the county over a 7-year period. So really super excited. Kudos to the Planning and Zoning Department for doing this, because people really want to know this information. A lot of times and then they also send it out monthly. They check to see who possibly have been some new shoreland owners on the lakes and the rivers, and they will send that information out to the new owners as well, so they get a better understanding of what the rules are regarding shoreline. So thank you very much for doing that, and there again, education is vitally important. A lot of times people do things that they just don't know that they can't do because nobody told them or educated them as to what the rules are. That's it for me. How'd I do? Was I a little over 30 seconds?
You were over 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Hear that?
Yeah.
Greg's next.
All right.
Yeah.
So-
Time's up.
Starting with the solar field, I was pretty happy to see that they're going to agrivoltaics out there, that we're going to be raising sheep, putting that land back into agricultural production, which is, I think that's fantastic. I hope that works out. NACO Public Safety, FEMA's going to be redone. FEMA's going to have some work done to it, possible some cuts. Violent Offender Task Force covered finances in anti-meth, energy transitions, webinar that I sat in on. I mean, the big thing there is stable public policy, making government permitting easier, working in partnership with businesses. District AMC, 5 AMC meeting, everybody covered that. Metropolitan Emergency Services Board executive meeting, additional armor services authorized, new budget was authorized. Discussion of the Motorola contract, new radios are super expensive, and we're still looking into that. NACO Rural Action, looking to rural research and federal policies. That was a pretty good little webinar. The CMRP, I did review the notes, but I did not attend that. Central Minnesota Jobs and Training, the operations, I'm on the Finance Committee and the Operations Committee. There are some real specific challenges that are coming up financially for that organization, and we'll keep watching that. Let's see, we're trying to recruit more members for the Community and Government Relations Committee, if people are interested in that. CMSD Joint Powers Board, There wasn't a whole lot on that. We did have an interesting presentation on the differences between older age groups and the younger people that are coming to work and their differences on what they want out of their jobs and out of their careers and out of their lives. AMC Lunch and Learn on solar siting. Rayanne mentioned that one. Becker Freedom Days. I did go to Becker Freedom Days, the Vets Tribute at the Legion Post. That was pretty good. We went to the parade. The county extension meeting. Basically, we're getting ready for the fair. People should probably show up for that. County Board of Appeal and Equalization, everybody mentioned that one already. The 1010 building ribbon cutting, that's going to be a great program up there. I did stop by the Law Enforcement Special Olympics Torch Run just to congratulate the people who were on that and watch the handoff to Wright County. Constituent issues I've been working on, County Road 75 still with the boat landing. We're making some progress there. Public Works did a great job of getting the barrels moved, and it really kind of delineates the private property a lot better this week. So hopefully with a few more signs, that'll at least be smooth, and we'll maybe get something done on the negotiations on that. County Road 93, there was some concern about how the road's being rebuilt. We're working through that. Minnesota PUC docket 24352, waste-derived fuels for Energy Pass 2040. A lot of stuff has been submitted in the public comment area. I'm trying to go through it. Basically, you could condense it down to people who make their money off of saying carbon is destroying the planet are really against it, and people who actually produce energy are for it. That's about as simple as you can make that one. Becker Big Lake Post Office, just kind of started getting into that. That's something that they're talking about moving both of those post offices, and one of the ideas that's been floated out there is moving both post offices across the river into Monticello. That doesn't seem very functional for the people that we serve. That would put a lot of extra traffic on that bridge, and it's not going to be a good thing. So kind of jumping into that a little bit late in the game, actually, but it is something that will probably be a concern of, and we may need to talk about at our next meeting. And then one other constituent issue that came up, I became aware that in our general rural districts, we're not allowed to have vet clinics. I think that's something that we need to change, and I'm going to be working towards that. If things that we need right now, the biggest crisis in veterinary medicine are large animals in general, because it's a very, very taxing job. You're constantly on call if you're a large animal vet, and the other type of veterinary care that we need everywhere is emergency small animal care. So if somebody wants to build those on 5 acres in a township, by God, I think we should have them. And that's it.
You went over.
I did.
Well, it was Greg years.
What's that?
It was Greg years, kind of like dog years.
Yeah. Time's different from over here.
We won't dwell on a few of the processes.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Commissioner.
Before you start, can I put a plug in? It is Spudfest weekend this weekend in Big Lake. So I'm inviting everybody to come to Spudfest. It is starting on the Thursday is family night, and then Friday the ball games start. Kicking off the ball games will be our fire department versus our police department. That starts at 5 o'clock on the Big Lake ball fields. They kick off the whole weekend of ball tournaments. And from that point on is the parade on Saturday. We have bingo, we have music. There's a car show on Sunday, pancake breakfast, lots of fun. So go to biglakespudfest.com and get all your information for Big Lake Spudfest. See you there. Thank you.
You just took another 30 seconds.
He did. I feel like I was brief.
I'll be really quick. Yeah, I did the District 5, which everybody already talked about, energy solar tour. I think the interesting thing about what agrivoltaics and the sheep is that they're going to have 7,000 total out there when they get done. Unlike you guys, I stayed for the stakeholder meeting, and they talked about a pilot program with hydrogen, which is great. I then transitioned over to family home visiting picnic, which I thought was the county put on. First Step was there, WIC, SNAP, and others from the county. I wish I would have spent more time there, but I wanted to get to the nuclear regulatory meeting, which was way out of my league. I should have stayed at the family home visiting picnic. Then I went to SHAC. We talked about the federal cuts and the effects that they're going to have. Bruce and I zoomed in on a Northland Reliability Project meeting, which highlights, I think, the letter was all in your packets today that we were going to send out in regards to that. Met with the county attorney about ditch 1A for the meeting that was going to be at a half an hour after that, which didn't happen because it was rescheduled, because they forgot to publish it as a closed session. The extension budget meeting and the extension board meeting, Board of Equalization, we all talked about that. The Parks and Trails Advisory out at Graham's, which I thought was great because I got to go through the tour for County Road 4 and 169, which I thought was, the detour was great. The 1010 building, ribbon cutting was there. That's gonna be a great building. I think you can mark my words that I think we'll get so much use out of that, they're gonna outgrow that facility. So in the back of our heads, I think a brick and mortar building of some kind, sooner or later will be needed in that South St. Cloud area. Then I did the NACO Agricultural and Rural Affairs meeting by Zoom yesterday. That's it. And we are gonna quickly do the ditch meeting quickly, and then we'll take a break. Is that okay with everyone?
Yeah, Mike said he's
Mike's been sitting
waited
here so
25
long
years,
and
he doesn't want
patient.
to wait any longer, so.
Yeah. So Mike, it's all yours. And we have to, first off, approve the County Ditch Authority agenda.
I would move that we approve the County Ditch Authority agenda.
Mr. Chair, did you actually recess the regular meeting?
We are recessed. Thank you. It's keeping us in track.
I would make a motion to approve the.
We already have one.
Second.
Second.
Well, theoretically, we're good.
Any further discussion? None? We approve the agenda.
Aye.
Aye.
Consider receipt and acceptance of ditch drainage. Mike, you're on.
Good morning, everybody. Almost afternoon.
Boy, was that a dig. Thanks, Mike.
We on
Keep in
schedule
mind.
here? Because I got about a half an hour. No, I'm just kidding. Any comments about my written report?
No.
It's good.
None? Okay. I'll move on to my PowerPoint. Ditch number 4, that's one of 2 small dams. This is on County Road 38, just east of 169. I have a video later of a better picture of that up in the air. Ditch 15. This is south of County Road 61, west of County Road 20. We discovered that the water was really backed up. The culvert at the road the water was a foot and a half above the culvert, so we knew something was up. This has been a problem area for years because it connects to the Elk River. Every couple of years, more of them move up the river and find new territory after we take them out. So we went and did a little exploratory here about 3 weeks prior to this picture. Good thing we did because, wow, quite the dam. This is just going down. The tree line is basically about where the river is, just past the trees or the river. It's actually very beautiful back there. So our county ditch turned into a huge pond down there. Yeah. This is another view of it down in that area, how big the pond is. This is algae blooms. That's what happens when you don't let the ditches flow and you have stagnant water. The algae blooms take over. And it's a good thing we were there when we were there because after the heat we've had, we wouldn't be able to get down there with a motor. It would have been so choked out. This is the dam. This is just a part of it. This is a 10-foot john boat. It was the only way we could get down there. There was no way you were going to be able to access this by walking with hip boots or waders. There's the dam part of it. This is the part where we set the charges and the explosives. There's another view. It's very deceptive, but down below, that dam's holding up about, I'd say, 4 to 4.5 feet of water. It's been there for a while. It's pretty obvious with all the vegetation growing on it. And there's not a whole lot of sign, but we did trap 5 beavers out of there. And the trapper took his john boat down the same way we did. That was the only way he could access. Another view of the dam. It goes up and around where the trees are there. It goes all the way up around the corner into the woods. We estimate that the dam was probably close to 200-300 feet long. Good thing we did, like I said earlier, we went and explored and saw what we were getting into, so we brought the big guns down there to take care of this. Those pink plastic bags is the ANFO. That's ammonium nitrate fuel oil. Those are the charges, and then the boosters are on the right. Those are equivalent, each one of those is equivalent to about 2.5 sticks of dynamite. TNT, what TNT stands for, I don't know, but today, not tomorrow, I don't know. And then the other ones are K-pipe, and they're a faster exploding. They tear apart the sticks. This is Jeff loading the charges into the mud. He uses that plunger to pilot a hole. After he pilots the hole, he spins down the charge. And then on the other side of that round plunger is a flatter side to even push them down even farther into the mud. Here's tying them all together with the det cord. Det cord's detonation cord. 26,000 feet per second it travels the charge, the electrical charge. So he ties them all together in a series. We use 10 charges, ANFO, 3 boosters of the TNT, and 3 K-pipe over a width of about 25 to 30 feet. There's a little waterfall there. That's a part where the trapper pushed down a hole in there to let the water leak out and see if they come back and repair it, and they never did, so it's a good indication that we took care of what was in the area. You can see the smoke down by where we put the charges. That's the fuse that we lit. We timed it how long it would take us to get down there in the boat. He has a 2.5 horse Yamaha four-stroke motor on there. It took us like 16 minutes. So we gave ourselves a 19-minute fuse. The fuse is about 1 foot is about approximately 1 minute. So we lit the fuse and we're on our way out of there. And we had to get back. Otherwise, when that dam blows, that water gets out of there, and then there we are beached. And I don't we have a helicopter rescue. I don't even know what we do. I don't know what we do. But here we are, hightailing it out of there. You can kind of see the smoke in the background. Hightailing it out of there full throttle at about 2 miles an hour, but it beats rowing. This is after we let it go. This is about an hour and a half or 2 after. This is on the north side of County Road 61. You can see in the sides that water just, within about 2 hours, it already dropped almost a foot. So that tells you that there's a significant amount of water. Ditch 32. This is in north of County Road 19 on 112th, east of 169. This riser here is basically a water control structure. The landowner had called me and said, yeah, it's backing up and it's saturating our yard. And they have a drain field back there and they're kind of getting worried about it, which they should be. They don't want that saturated ground. So it was plugged up with cattails pretty good. So we brought in a mini backhoe and kind of got all the cattails away and cleaned the area out. Took the riser off, cut a few bigger holes in it just so it would drain better, because those smaller holes, they plug up pretty easy. You can see he oblonged the openings a little bit to allow more water to get in there. And this is afterward, put it all back together, and water was draining really good, and the landowner notified me a couple days later that it made a huge improvement. So you always like to hear that. That's it for the pictures. I do have a couple videos of the dams going. Yeah, if you want to start with number 44. Okay.
Yep.
You got a car coming? Yeah. This one we used a detonator with a detonator, so we knew when to stop the traffic. Nope, we're good. Right at all.
Love these videos. There's a lot of mud.
Might be a little tough on the windshield wipers.
A little bit of debris to clean off the road, but there's the smoke from the blast. 37. Yeah, this is up going, this is the dam just south of 61. That's the fuse wire right there. And then 39. This is the small dam that we're at. You could speed it up to about minute 1 if you want to go ahead. This is the dam where we just pulled up with that boat. Right there is probably good. And that's that. That's all I have. Any comments, questions, concerns?
Brad, you want to do a ride-along next time?
You want to do that, don't you?
He does.
I actually,
No. He's no.
Thank you. Nope, thank you for what you guys do. It matters.
Yeah.
We don't want septic systems flooding. We don't want people's yards doing, the damage that is created is
One job you get to work with
substantial.
explosives.
Yeah.
It's fun to blow stuff
Yeah.
up.
It's gonna be fun. Need a motion to approve the,
So moved.
Second.
second by Commissioner Felber. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Okay, one other comment. Using the explosives to take care of these dams is probably about 1/3 of the cost, if you were to bring in a backhoe. And as you can see, some of the areas, you're not bringing a machine in there.
Right.
It's just not possible, so. We try to blast whenever we can to save money, save the constituents money, because ultimately they're getting assessed for it, so,
And it takes a long time to hand dig
Yeah.
them out. I did that work at one point. It was really exhausting.
yeah.
But
All right.
it's
Thank you.
satisfying to hand dig them apart and take them up. It's satisfying.
He likes to do that.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and you gotta get the beaver out of there first, otherwise you're gonna come back and do it again the next day.
Yeah. Oh, it's actually, yes. No, I wanted to come back. It's
Yeah, he likes to watch it.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
So the other business on the agenda is the RBA to pay back the general fund for advances made earlier to cover overdrawns on the county ditch accounts. We have about $10,000 that we have fronted the ditch accounts over the past years. At this point, there is not money in those funds to repay those. We will wait till after settlement and the collections that we get from there.
Okay,
Okay?
all right.
That's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you. take a 5-minute break.
Do you want a motion on that to move, do you need a motion to
We
move
don't
it?
need a motion.
Okay.
But you need to close the meeting.
We'll recess the meeting now.
No?
Close meeting.
Close the meeting. We'll take a
You
5-minute.
close the ditch authority meeting, go back in regular, and then take a break.
What he said.